Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Today is episode number 157. I'm Phil from ShopNotes, joined by Logan today from Popular Woodworking. John, one of our usual cast of suspects, is having some trouble with drainage. We'll leave it right there. So I hope you stick around for today's episode. We're going to talk about repairing, customizing, and modifying tools on today's episode. We're also going to discuss how Phil moves on and shop coffee tales. So you want to hang around for that. We'll get started with a couple of comments from last episode, which we talked about rescued wood and found wood projects, you know, just in all of its different forms. And there were some pretty cool ones here. Somebody actually knows John and says he actually has a great reclaimed wood project. He made his dad's shop cabinets from old shelves from our former business. The building was built around 1870. So that was pretty cool.
I think John dropped the ball on that one, not saying
right.
that.
Yeah,
Jeez.
Just hiding that little nugget of wisdom. Darren said, I made a compound angle tray from some spalted pear gathered from a tree that had blown down in my neighbor's yard. I gave the tray to the daughter who grew up there as a wedding gift with a note that read something like, as you start the next chapter of your life, this tray was made from a tree that stood where you grew up. I hope it will remind you of home. She puts her keys in it, sees it every day. This guy's done other things like that also. Y'alls in Franklin County, Iowa in the mid-1960s, my dad took down the neighbor's 30-foot tall wood silo in exchange for the lumber. I remember the wood was 2x6 tongue and groove red cedar with many of the salvageable boards that were the full 30-foot length. We used most of the lumber for roof and sidewall framing for a metal machine shed. There was very little quantity of nails as the silo used metal bands every 2.5 to 3 feet up the silo to hold the boards when the silo was filled. FYI, I used to share an office with a guy who made custom motorcycle parts out of aluminum. He did have them powder coated. We were talking about powder coating and Cerakote last episode as well. Many old woodblock makers, as in really old, older than Phil, used European pear for its fine grain. All right, well, that's good to know.
So there's two people that said they made something out of pear.
Yep. And one of our listeners, Puppy Doc, said he made a hope chest for his now ex-wife out of Western red cedar many years ago. Long story, but somehow I ended up with custody of the cedar chest in the divorce. No doubt there have been some hope jokes to be made from that story. I should pull it out of storage and take some pictures of it. It was actually my first woodworking project more than 30 years ago. All right, so that's like our first reference to anybody wanting to participate in the Red Cedar Challenge.
Yes.
Which, to me, only proves your point.
I know. Well, I will say, so I watched I was out of town this last several days, and I got home. It was kind of binging on some woodworking YouTubers that I had missed videos on, just kind of relaxing in the air conditioning, which was good. It was awesome. With no mosquitoes. And Richard Raffin had, and I've talked about Richard recently on the podcast about how he's been doing a lot of videos. He didn't call it red cedar. He called it juniper because he's a smart man.
Right.
He had a juniper block that he turned a bunch of spatulas out of.
Oh,
and
really?
He did a couple of little bowls. They were gorgeous. And I'm like,
okay.
I literally thought about it. I'm like, wow, I would have not, because a lot of times you see like the, Eastern red cedar or juniper turned into bowls, and it's super knotty because that's just how the trees are. But he cut around them, and it just, I'll see if I can snag a screenshot of his video for the show notes page, because it's pretty awesome.
All right, that would be cool.
Yeah. There was a couple people that mentioned that they had made some stuff out of pear. And this chisel handle here, and I have a couple of handles that I've done out of pear. And actually, I don't have that plane sitting next to me. I have an infill that I made that also has a pear infill in it. This is one of my favorite woods, and I just cannot get it. I mean, you can't.
Right.
It's not a commercial wood, so I kind of have to find somebody that's taking a pear tree down, and pear trees aren't super common in Iowa.
No.
But my word, this has been one of my favorite woods ever. It turns absolutely beautifully. It's fine, very, very fine grain. I could see why it would take detail well, like if you're doing blocks out of it. So just.
I mean, pear and apple are somewhat related.
Yes.
Botanically, right? I mean, but beyond the fact that they're trees.
Yeah.
And fruit bearing.
Yeah, this happens to be apple.
Yeah.
That happens to be pear. So, yeah. Very, very
and
similar.
I like apple just the few times that I've used it because I think you were talking about sawing it on your bandsaw mill and it being harder than snot. But then when you start working with it, like with hand tools or even like chisels and files, like it just shapes beautifully. It's kind of weird for how hard it is. You would expect it to be just as cantankerous when you're starting to use it, but like it planes really nicely. And well, like you said, with turning, that it's a delight there.
Yeah. Oh God, it's wonderful. Yeah. I've done a bunch of handles out of both apple and pear. My pear I've been pretty conservative with. I had a piece on my bench that I was gonna have. My buddy Rusty that made me this ebony spoke shave that we talked about a couple weeks ago. I was gonna have him make it out of a piece of pear, because this pear tree came out of my grandpa's backyard. I took it down for him. Yeah, I took it down for him probably 8 years ago. It was hollow, it had a lot of ants in it, and that was actually the reason I didn't have him make the spoke shave out of it, was because I couldn't get a good section that didn't have ant holes in it. I have a couple. Yeah. I have a couple, and most pear I have seen is very white. It's very pale. It's a pretty plain looking wood, honestly.
Right.
But this log that I got out of my grandpa's place, it had a lot of color, and I don't know if that color came from the heartwood. I honestly, at that point, I didn't pay much attention to it. It was just cut it into parts.
Right.
And I don't know if it came out of the heartwood. I don't know if it was mineral stains from the bugs, or maybe insect infiltration that caused some of these different purple hues or brown hues into it. I don't know. I just know that it is gorgeous stuff, and I want to sell my firstborn, but Henry I would definitely sell for some.
He'd at least take offers.
Yeah, I'd take offers. So.
And since John's not here, I'm going to have to make the comment that I've worked with some people that were ant holes. So
yeah. Yes.
So, yeah. No, and I think I've always shied away a little bit. I had gotten some apple from another coworker, Randy Maxey, when he was here. But other times, the only other instances where I've seen people using pear was like Krenov pieces, where he had some like Swiss pear or something, blah, 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 and made one of his tiny little cabinets on stands or whatever. And it just felt like a very hoity-toity kind of wood. But
well, I think Swiss pear is actually one that you can get. So the two commercial fruit woods, or the two woods you can get, fruit woods you can get commercially, are Swiss pear. So you can get Swiss pear, and you can get German apple, which sounds like a fantastic pie, but
right. Yeah.
But it's German apple, and I don't know what botanically, I don't know what the difference between the two are. Or let me rephrase that. Botanically, I don't know the difference between like the apple we get here and German apple, or like a fruit pear and a Swiss pear tree. I don't know.
Right.
I know that I have a friend, Russ, here in town that is he ran a tree farm for a long time. One of the most intelligent guys I have ever met. He's told me that a lot of the apple trees in the States have been bred down, genetically bred down into a dwarf version of the tree for picking. So
Right.
I don't know if like the German apple is botanically kind of the same tree, but it hasn't been bred smaller, so it grows larger, grows straighter. I don't know for sure.
Could be. Yeah.
That's just my speculation.
I mean, because I've seen photography of places like in Central Asia where apples came from, where the trees are like 100 feet tall or more.
Yeah, which would be crazy to see.
Yeah. And a totally different experience to pick.
Yeah, yes. You need a true like they call it a cherry picker, but you need a
Right.
apple picker.
Yeah.
Pick them.
Apple picker. Yeah.
Yep.
You can't just use the like laundry soap bucket that you do the little cutout teeth on it on a pole and just kind of.
No. So a quick Google search has told me that the European apple is what they're calling it, European apple.
Okay.
You can buy in flitches ranging length range from 24 inches to 8 foot, average width around 11 and a half inches. So they're not much larger than our apple trees here. They just look like they maybe are a little straighter.
All right.
Because in Iowa, at least, you don't get a straight apple log. they're very twisting
all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, because they're forking, like 18 inches off the ground, so you don't.
That's right.
There's not much of a single trunk,
Yep. So I don't know. I blame the saw makers of the early 19th century, 20th century. For raiding all of our trees for apple saw handles.
There you go. Henry Diston, we're looking at you.
Yes, we are.
Now, just before we started the podcast, I was reaching over to grab my water cup, which usually just sits off frame just right here, and was about to take a drink when I very presciently looked inside the cup and realized that maybe a week or more ago, I had made some iced coffee in there and never really finished it. So it had gone funky. There was a definite teeming of life on the inside. So I'd like to know if anybody else has had that experience, especially working in your shop where you might take a cup of coffee out to the shop, set it down. Who knows when you come back to it, and what kind of things have you discovered? Or little fun stories to go with it. Maybe you took a pull off of it before you discovered that. I want to hear about that too.
Yeah, took a drag of your cultured coffee.
Yeah. It's the new thing. Fermenting is all around us. So
yeah. See, I don't. You must have put some form of sugar, or you do honey a lot in your coffee?
Yeah, usually probably honey at that point that I had swirled in there. And
yeah, see, I do straight black coffee usually, and I have been known to have several half a dozen coffee cups, up to a half a dozen, not several half dozens coffee cups in my truck, because I get home from the office, I have tools I'm carrying inside, and I just don't ever go back out for the coffee cups. So occasionally I'll go out and I'll be like, oh, I should probably, I run out of coffee cups in the house. So it's like, oh, I got to go to the coffee cup store and open my truck and bring in an armful.
Run the sanitize cycle on the dishwasher.
Yep. There's never anything growing in them, though. Like, I think the black coffee, the straight black coffee doesn't seem to grow anything.
Okay.
So I'm sure if I put cream in there, or maybe some sugar, something for something to grow on, then I might have an issue.
It's still kind of funny to me that even nothing would grow just straight in the coffee. Cause I mean, right behind me over here, we have our coffee maker. And if we leave that, over an extended period of time, we'll pull that open, and there's some fuzz. There's some growth on the grounds in there. So, but
no, I haven't had that issue. I will say, I have. Where was I last? I was somewhere last doing photography, and I had a coffee cup that was just getting full of shavings, and I don't remember what it was. But it's like, it's okay. I'm
Yeah.
gonna drink it. Like, it's different if the lung goes it's different if the dust goes in your lungs versus going into your stomach.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
little extra fiber.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah. So
I mean, like you brew beer and people put, like little oak cubes in there for extra tannins and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
it's practically the same.
Yeah. Interesting. So kind of, tied into both the coffee and the ingesting wood thing. I was at the pet store the other day. As you know, I have 2 puppies now. Getting dog food, and they are in the chewing stage. They've been in the office as we have been filming. They like to grab chunks of wood and just chew on them.
Chew on it.
That's fine. I mean, I prefer them not to eat it, but they do. They vomit when we get home. It's all good. Life's great. But I'm in the pet store, and I see chunks of what are labeled coffee wood, like coffee wood branches. They're
Okay.
I don't know. They have different sizes. They are, anywhere from 6 inches for small dogs up to, maybe 1.5 feet long for big dogs. And their label, they're kind of expensive for what they are. The ones I've been buying are maybe 1.5 to 2, not quite 2 inches in diameter, probably 1.5 to 1.75 inches in diameter, foot long. They're about $10 a piece. So not what I would call cheap. I don't want to calculate out that board foot price. It might be cheaper for ebony. But reading the tag, it says these are offcuts from the natural pruning that they do on coffee trees.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, okay, that's a little odd. Not something I've ever heard of. But the fibers on them are super short, so the dogs can chew them. They can digest them without any issues. And it actually says it will lead to, if your dog is a chewer of or eater of grass or other unspeakables in the yard, it will help alleviate that. And it sure has. I mean, they're puppies. They still like to chew everything. They don't mow the grass like goats anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this stuff, it feels really tight grained.
Okay.
The ends are like, it looks like it's polished very nicely. So they must cut it and then send it in a tumbler and polish them up.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I could try to make some pen blanks out of some of these.
See, I was wondering how fast you went from, I wonder if the dogs could use this, to, I might turn some of this.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. And because it's not something I've ever, coffee wood is not a thing. Kentucky coffee tree is a thing, but you don't see coffee turning blanks. I'm like, this might be interesting.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's things that you just don't connect with being useful for a project.
Correct.
I saw something where Peter Follansbee, I think, was on the Woodwright shop, and he was making spoons, and he had a piece of lilac or rhododendron, where the leaves on the rhododendron are toxic, but the wood is fine. And so you made spoons out of it. Or there was a guy at the Des Moines Woodworkers that he had brought in some pens that he had turned, and he had called it rosewood. But it was actually from rose bushes that he had pruned. They had just gotten pretty chunky, and then he was able to make pens out of it, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah. Well, and it's I had mentioned to you that I have a bunch of honeysuckle that is pretty big and pretty straight.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's I don't know what to do with it, but and you'd mentioned that you'd seen people do honeysuckle spoons and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. When I was just reading, there was a guy from Iowa, Dick Prenicky, who's usually on a PBS pledge drive where they show him in the 50s and 60s, where he would go to Alaska and then built his own cabin and lived there off the land, kind of a thing. There's a book about him, kind of a biography or whatever, if you will. And he had made like spoons and bowls out of spruce.
Okay.
Which was kind of novel to me because I've never really... Spruce is not one of those things where you think of as being like a spoon wood. But he had some photos of them, and they looked really cool. So
I feel like some of those would just be sticky.
maybe.
Like,
I don't know.
You give your greatest enemy spoons made out of like poison
Spruce?
oak vines. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't know.
But he had found like spruce burls that he would turn into bowls and stuff like that. So
I have a white pine burl that is in my yard right now, from where all those pine trees I cut from the tornado, and I haven't.
Oh yeah.
Can't bring myself to put it on the lathe because the green pine smells fantastic. I love chainsawing it, and I like cutting it on the sawmill. I really have a problem thinking about those sticky shavings hitting me in the chest. Like, no.
Maybe just wear a shirt.
That's oh god, I've been doing this wrong.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what that would be like. I even thought of that with I don't think he turned anything. I don't think he had like a treadle lathe. He did all of it as, kind of like greenwood sculpted carving kind of thing. But even still, like that could get your tools pretty gummy also.
Oh yeah.
After a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. It's surprising to me how much sap some of those trees can either hold or contain or drop on the top of your tarp as you are camping in northern Minnesota, southern Canada. Because I'm like sitting here looking. I mentioned it today when I was in camping this last week. It's like I didn't know there was so many maple trees in Voyager National Park. Which it's a lot of pines, a lot of spruces, a lot of spruces, spruce-eye, spree,
spree, sprees.
Yeah, a lot of poplars as well.
Okay,
but there's also a lot of maple trees, which I didn't know. But anyways, just the amount of sap these stupid trees drop. It's like folding up tarps after we're done for the week. It's like everything's sticky. Like, my kids' hands are black with sap. I mean, it's like, dude, you're halfway to being Spider-Man. Just see if you can climb that tree.
So was it a little bit like going back in time? Like was it noticeably earlier spring up there?
No, because it's been warm enough up there.
Okay.
That it was not. The mosquitoes were the worst that anybody could remember this early, which was miserable, but I mean, it was fine. But no, I was expecting maybe trees would just be starting to bud out. Nah, everything was leafed out. Everything was green. The water was cold. It was 50 degrees still, but they're granite lakes. I mean, they're lakes that are surrounded by granite. That rock stays really cold late into the summer and really warm late into the fall. So
sure,
but no, I was keeping an eye out for not from Voyagers National Park because you cannot do that. But I was keeping an eye out for somewhere I could pick up a birch log on the way home and just throw it in the back end of the truck, just to turn some white birch bowls or something. I didn't find any. So yeah. I didn't look that hard. I mean, I probably could have stopped at firewood stand, but that's not a good firewood, really.
Yeah, but I would imagine it wouldn't really stop people either. So from selling it in firewood, but
yeah, yep.
All right, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, I follow Adam Savage online. Mm-hmm. He was on Mythbusters and has a YouTube channel called Tested, and he's got a bunch of stuff. It's really interesting for me to watch him because he's a shop rat of a very high degree and a pretty wide range of curiosity in terms of what he can do, from woodworking and metalwork and electronics and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of fun for me to see. And also just the way his shop is, because it just doesn't look like there's a bare wall in there at all.
It looks like it would be hard to move around or find anything.
Yeah. But whenever he's looking for something in a video, it's just like, oh yeah, it's right here.
Well, and he has this leans more into his like shop mentality with his tool storage. He talks about the first order of retrievability. So it's like your items you use the most need to be in front of the tools you use the second most, and then those need to be in front of the tools you use the third most. So very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. I also follow Tested on YouTube. So
yeah. And he was quoted recently in an article on NPR. I'll put a link in the show notes page about the right to repair. And there's a lot of legislation and kind of activism about some of the things that we have in our contemporary life that people just either can't or aren't allowed to, in quotes, fix or modify. You know, whether it's like your smartphone, you know, because like jailbreaking was a thing for a while. And I mean, in Iowa, there was a big thing about it in terms of farm equipment here, because, you know, you get a lot of the major farm equipment manufacturers. And if you want to keep your warranty, you have to take it to, you know, a licensed, authorized, certified note from your mother dealer to get it fixed. And that hurts people who kind of have that as a side hustle, and also ends up being expensive. And depending on where you live, a hassle, because you're driving quite a ways in order to get something repaired. So, and I was wondering, because I definitely feel this way, so I'd like your thoughts on it. Is that part of the reason that you have gravitated towards your affinity for older tools, in the fact that they're, in a sense, easier to maintain and or customize or upgrade?
I think that my gravitation towards older tools, that's some of it, but more along the lines of they were just built better.
Right.
And they were built more simple. I mean, and in some instances that might not be as good, but in some instances it might be better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, instead of having aluminum trunnions holding whatever in place, it's cast iron and it's just drilled and tapped into the steel. And like,
yeah,
either it's broke or it's not.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where, that's where my.
Right. And you've said that before, where you know, like, quality is the main reason, and, you know, especially quality for price.
Yes.
You know, considering that they're older tools. But I feel like there is definitely, if you draw the Venn diagram on that a higher quality tool is probably going to be easier to maintain.
I think so.
And fix up.
You're going to, I think you're going to have less fiddling with stuff. Now, there are people, though, that like to fiddle.
Sure.
They like to just tinker. And that's cool. Like, there are people that really like buying Harbor Freight stuff because they like making it better. You know what I mean? Like, they'll go buy the bandsaw from Harbor Freight. They'll rip off the tires, rip off the guides, throw Carter stuff on there, get new American-made bearings. I'm like, bro, you could have just bought you could have, for what you have into it, you could have bought a high-quality saw. That's fine. That's...
Yeah.
Like, if that's your jam and you want to tinker, great. But I think you're right. I think the more you pay, for the most part, this is, I think, all, you know, in general, the more you pay, the less maintenance you're going to have to do.
Right.
So it will, once it's dialed in, it will stay dialed in.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah. But I would say that I would think that a large portion of woodworkers, because we're interested in woodworking and creating something of our own, that bleeds over into a desire to not just have your tools be stock. Like you're going to
tricking out your tools.
You're going to trick it out. And I mean, it can be something as putting stickers on your bandsaw, but it could also be replacing the guides, you know, whether it's pieces of maple or ebony that you've cut to fit instead of having the dumb cool blocks or whatever in there, you know, like, you know, that, or you're going to take your coping saw and turn a new handle for it, or, you know, like I did with my chisel set that I got as a wedding gift, is I popped all the plastic handles off and turned wood handles on it. And I mean, functionally, metallurgically, they're the same chisel, but functionally they feel better to me and they work better because of a nicer handle.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I would go as far as to say that the people that today mark their hand planes with their name, they're doing the same thing.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I have a stamp. I have a hand plane stamp that if I have a molding plane, I'm going to smash my name into it. And I mean, it was an expensive stamp, but I like putting my name on it, and it then becomes part of the story. Now, I don't do it for an ownership thing where I'm going and working with 3 dozen other, union workers in a building. It's more of, just my own thing. But 100%.
Yeah. Cause it was just kind of, I've talked about it before, I think just as a group here, where I just don't really view my tools as being mine until I've done something to them to help them work along the way that I like to work.
Sure.
Whether it's left-handed primarily, which is why I like the bandsaw, because I feel like a bandsaw is really a left-handed tool.
Hey, yeah, I could see that.
So, anyway, it was just kind of a curiosity, because I feel like that kind of mindset plays very well with most woodworkers, that we are adapters and modifiers and creators, whether you're making a Krenov style plane or like you said, even just stamping your name on a tool, or, filing a saw handle or plane tote to fit your hand better, or eliminate a hot spot or something like that, I think is all part of it.
Yeah. I find myself, and anybody that does a lot of turning will, I think, kind of agree with me, that initially I was under the mentality that you need like 6 turning tools. Well, the more you start doing things, the more you start modifying the turning tools to do exactly what you need them to do. So it's like, I might only need 1 3/8 inch bowl gouge.
Right.
But I might need 3 3/8 inch bowl gouges because each one has a different profile on the end.
Right.
Or I have a profile on the end that I've ground the heel away to get a tight radius, that type of thing. And that is the main reason why I'm sitting here looking at my bench grinder with my CBN wheels. That's the main reason why I have one CBN wheel that's 80 grit and one that's 220. I sharpen on the 220 and I reprofile on the 80. That's where I do my heavy grinding. So,
right.
That's, absolutely. I actually I was swapping emails with Richard Raffin a couple weeks ago, asking him about one of his scrapers that he uses. And he's like, I don't know if they're making, because he had his signature line of tools. And he's like, I don't know if they're making them anymore, which they are. He's like, I don't see the scraper available from anywhere in the States. He lives in Australia. He's like, here, just buy one of these SKUs and regrind it. I'm like, all right, sure.
Done.
So, bought one of his signature series SKUs and just reground it. And it's like, hey, let's buy a new tool and grind an inch off the end.
Yeah.
So, hey, it works.
Yeah, that's true. And because I have a couple of carving tools, small palm carving tools that I got from Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is like a little V tool or veiner or whatever you want to call it, V gouge. And those things are kind of a punk to sharpen. And you and I were talking about like the different ways that Al Breed would sharpen some of his V gouges, where, you have like the wings swept back, or maybe you have them swept forward for different purposes and different cuts. And I think even with your turning tools, like you've made or modified handles for several of them.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I'm going to grab my prison shank to show you, because I did that. All right. Yep. I don't know where it is. My prison shank's missing. I have to go check my kid's pillow.
There you go. All right. If we find it, we can put a photo on the show notes page.
Well, it's like I had a pop wood reader had sent me a couple hand planes to restore for him, which is not a service I offer. I want to make that known to everybody right now. But I agreed to do them. And he also had sent a couple of chisels that needed new handles. And I agreed to do them. So I did them. And one of the handles he had sent, or one of the chisels, it was a bluegrass, Belknap bluegrass. I think it's out of Tennessee. It was a hardware. It was a line of hardware store tools. The logo is a 4-leaf clover. It's actually really cool. I have a couple of their axes that are very nice. Anyways, one of them had a handle on it still, and it was a resin in a green, like resin handle, kind of similar to what you had on yours, Phil, but they were socket ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and of the 5 chisels, 4 of them didn't have handles, but one did. So I yanked that one off, threw it in my bucket of parts, and made him a nice set of ash handles. But then I'm like, you know what? Like, that's a fun story. Got this handle from a reader from doing his chisel, whatever. So I needed, when I'm doing bowls, I like to mark my depth with a drill bit. You just kind of, line up how deep you want, drill a hole right in the center. It's hard to hold a drill bit as you're pushing it into the wood.
Yeah.
So I just melted a drill bit into this handle, and it works beautifully. Like, it is the best thing ever. It looks like a prison shiv, but man, it works wonders. I was really happy with it. So I might find that and get a picture up on the show notes page.
All right, that sounds pretty cool. So the last thing on my agenda for today is, I don't remember if you brought it up in the last podcast or the one before, about my trials and tribulations with making a router mortising jig.
Yeah.
I've been working on that since we basically launched this podcast, I think, in 2020. So I've decided to move that concept out into the universe and just go back to a modified version of one of Chris Fitch's benchtop router mortising jigs.
Okay.
Very similar to one that we did on the show. So, but I am going to use one of the components from my slot mortiser jig idea for it, which I think it'll remind me of that little quest, but then also serve my purposes. So I've thought of a few other modifications that I want to do to the jig just to make it a little easier or nicer to work with. So there you go.
Okay. Well,
I can grow.
You can let go.
I can let go. That's probably more of what it is.
Yeah. I have a couple of bowl blanks I've been looking at that I roughed out 3 years ago. They're good and dry now. But I'm like, those are ugly. Like, the shapes are bad. Like, there may not be any salvaging them,
Yeah.
And I'm like, is it even worth trying? Like, to me,
Yeah.
it's like, it may not even be worth it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, maybe you just soak them in shellac and denatured alcohol and just light them up one night at home and just.
That's right. I do have a new fire pit that they could go into.
See, because I was looking in our little prop closet over here, and up on the top shelf is your blown up bowl too. Remember that one?
Yeah. Well, okay. Yes. So I was kind of holding on to hope that I would find the missing part.
Uh-huh.
And it's somewhere in the shop. Still, it just has never. Well, I don't know where. Like,
yeah,
it was such a good that. It was a pin oak root flare. So it was like the knee of like a cypress knee, but like a pin oak one. Like that's not a real thing. That's what it was, and it had a really cool look. Like when it was wet, and I do have a picture of that. I will put that on the show notes page. It looked like marble.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It was gorgeous. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, this is going to be great. Here's one more final cut to take that little ridge out, just an ego thing. And that's, ego got me. Yep. Like, I need to take one more cut to get a little ridge out of the inside. And boy, I made that cut, and that bowl hit the wall about 45 miles an hour. And I remember like it was yesterday. Eric Loggy and Chris Fitch come walking out of, they were in his CNC room, which is the wall that it hit. They're like, hey, you all right? I'm like, oh, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm a little mad now because I was that last cut and before it went on the shelf to dry. Now, who knows? It may not have even dried fine. It may have broken apart during drying. But yeah, that's probably one that needs just to be let go.
Yeah.
It's all there except for about a silver dollar size piece that's missing.
Yeah. It's tough to let go of stuff like that because we had family in town last week, and so I wanted to have my workshop cleaned up because it just still had that kind of winter abandonment to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I cleaned up, and then after that, I decided to clean it out because when I was cleaning, I'm like, I just have a bunch of stuff here that little tiny pieces of wood that I knew that I was going to save because I could use them for X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, no, these are too small even for that. And you only have one of them, and you're probably going to need two if you're going to make a box out of it or a divider or something. And so I brought in a bunch of tools and jigs that I had that I just don't use and put them on a free table here and start the Woodsmith Summer Swap Meet.
Yeah. I saw, was that your fur box that was in the scrap wood?
Yes.
tub? I saw that. I'm like, man, those are nice pieces of fur.
I know. And that was kind of the sucker part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had started that box thinking that I could use it for whatever. And then we needed a prop for an article on cut nails and how to install those. And so I had it in there, and it's been in my workshop. I mean, probably a solid 6 years.
Yeah.
And I just was never going to do it. So if it keeps Chris just a little bit warmer this upcoming winter, then there you go.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking at 3 props from the TV show. One of which is a laminated blank for the smartphone amplifier.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yep.
So I got one of those all glued up. And then I have 2 of the staved birdhouse bodies.
All right.
And they're redwood. And that's the only reason I haven't gotten rid of them is because they're that old growth, vertical grain redwood, course on redwood. Yeah. And I'm like, boy, I would really like to do something with those. I don't know what.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Maybe canisters. Maybe I'll make some like sugar canisters or something out of them. Or
that'd be cool.
Canisters, like maybe something. Or maybe I'll make an actual birdhouse. I don't know.
Yeah. Birdhouse, and you can hang them on your new shop.
That's right. Hang them on the porch in the shop. Maybe I'll do that. I do have
some,
the finish. I have the finished one from the show here too.
Oh, do you?
I do. Yeah, it's sitting on top of the cabinets in here.
That's about right. Nice. All right, I think that wraps up another episode of the Shop Notes Podcast. The free plan that goes with today's episode is a table saw outfeed table, and a lot of times these can run the gamut from being these gigantic, like iceberg, Titanic-sized things to little crappy purchased roller stands. And this one kind of fits in a nice, just right-sized way. Attaches to the back fence rail on your table saw, has folding legs if you should ever want to take it off of your saw. But to be honest, we don't ever take ours off. It's on the back of our table saw, and it's been on the back of the table saw on the TV show set for probably 10 years or more. So it's a great little tool. It's a great accessory for your table saw. We were talking about upgrading and modifying tools. This is one thing you need for your table saw. So you want to check that out. The link will be at the show notes page at shopnotes.com/podcast or on our YouTube channel, Woodsmith, and you'll find the link there. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.